Hey everyone, this is your Ravens'Voice co-host Zealous here. Just letting you know that we have an extra long segment for this edition. We're going to be addressing the last 6 years of Armored Core, from Armored Core 4, Armored Core 4 Answer, and AC5. This first segment will be covering Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer. Links to Part 2 will be in the description, as well as a link for you to download an MP3 copy of this broadcast. Also, don't forget to check out facebook.com/armoredcore for the latest news on Verdict Day, the upcoming release. Looking for a August 24th US launch, 26th in Japan, and the 27th in Europe. Thank you, and enjoy.
All right, hey, welcome everybody to our second podcast. See the Raven's Voice with your host Tierson and of course Zealous.
Hello.
Let's see, we have two guests here tonight for this show. We got a huge topic that we want to cover, and we wanted to get some very distinctive perspectives on this. So yeah, we're definitely, we have a controversial topic here tonight. Probably one of the most controversial topics in the AC community, which has been the Armored Core games that have come out on this current generation of consoles. The PS3, obviously, and the Xbox 360 with Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer, and then obviously the current game, Armored Core 5. So we wanted to make sure that we were hitting as many perspectives as possible. So we have two guests here tonight. The first one, the one that I announced earlier in the week, that's Cleric, a longtime member of the community, but definitely has seen prominence as a public figure in the community here over the last few years. Go ahead and say hi to everyone, Cleric.
Hi, everyone. I'm Cleric.
All right,
I'll approach all I have.
and then the surprise guest that we have, the kind of the man in the hour right now. He had put on and was a large contributor to last week's exhibition event last Saturday. We have FromCheng. He is coming from the perspective of somebody who joined into the Armored Core series with this current generation of consoles. So, definitely a perspective that we wanted to cover. Go ahead and say hi to everyone, Cheng.
Hey, what's up, guys?
All right. Then, of course, you have myself, who was...
We're very formal here.
We have...
Hope you guys respect the tuxedos.
Well, and then of course there's myself, the returning veteran. I actually, obviously a prominent figure in the PS2 days, and I had actually quit playing before the next gen consoles came out, and then started up again with AC5. So, and then you have Zealous, obviously their host. He's coming from the perspective of somebody who did play during the current generation, but actually was bit disenfranchised with the games that had come out.
Oh, don't let me write you a book about it. I was as prominent as you were during the PS2 era, especially with hosting events and tournaments for the community, but this is a book we've been waiting to write for some time.
Well, we're going to write that book tonight, all of us. So yeah, four very different perspectives, and I think they cover a large amount of the community that we have now. So, we're going to go game by game. But first, before we get started with that, just a quick overview. We've seen a lot of changes with Armored Core and with the community over the last 5-6 years. The big ones, obviously, we got official online play with Armored Core 4, and starting with Armored Core 4, the community was split between two consoles, something that hadn't happened before all games previously on the PlayStation systems. Now on both of them. And those are the big ones. We're going to go game by game on that, but these definitely have some drastic changes and things. But with that, we're going to go ahead and start with Armored Core 4, and I'm pretty much going to throw that to these guys now, because I don't have a lot of experience with this game. Oddly enough, I've had 2 copies of this in my possession over the years, but I've played it very little. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Zealous, and then we'll go to Cleric and Cheng, and then I'll say a little something at the end, and then we'll just kind of banter back and forth about it. So with that, Go ahead, Zealous. Give us your views on Armored Core 4.
Good stuff, good stuff. Armored Core 4, release I don't know if I want to say remember fondly, but certainly a release I remember. Bear in mind, this is coming out of the last Raven era, AC3, what a lot of fans view as the golden age. I know we'd finished hosting our last tournament in the Midwest, ACMA2, Armored Core Midwest Arena. Cleric, you were there that day. And,
Oh yeah, tons of fun.
yeah, definitely. It's a great gathering, but we're coming out of a bit of a euphoric high there, and everything wasn't roses. There were some people from the community that had started to taper off and whatnot, but it was somewhat of a herald for what was to come. Myself, I made sure to pre-order the Japanese version of AC4. I was really excited hearing it coming out. Here you have Armored Core Next Gen system, and it's ironic, being an even number AC, it reminded me of AC2. Armored Core 2, as most of you remember, launched with PlayStation 2. So here we had another chance for a very futuristic cut in AC. What are we going to see with the graphics and whatnot? There were all kinds of questions flying in the air. But we had if I recall, the AC4 release from the Japan side slated for December 21st, and it dropped in North America March 20th, 07, and the European version, I believe, in June 28th, 2007. By the way, that was December 21st, 2006 for Japan. Just wanted to clarify that. So, with AC4 being introduced, we finally had official online play. I'd argue this was one of the biggest draws. As fans, this is something we'd looked for years. We had played Armored Core together through X-Link Kai, primarily. X-Link Kai hosted Armored Core Nexus.
Stupid Kai.
Now Armored Core Ninebreaker and Last Raven, and as Cleric's mentioning here, oh my goodness, the connection issues were just many. There were some players you could play, and others you just couldn't, and you had to accept that. So, with the advent of official online, it was very exciting. We also had Sega as a publisher. This was another first for the series. Armored Core had primarily been published by AgeTech in North America, and having a more prominent name, especially a large company like Sega, really was quite prominent. And that was really promising. Frankly, maybe we could see releases for patches, in time. Maybe, goodness, so you could have actually fan support and more of a community aspect to things. A lot of hope. There's a lot in the air for it. So, the release, what actually happened. I picked up my import copy ahead of time and kind of delved into things. Is just eager to get my hands on another AC game. And the first thing that hit me immediately were the environments, how much the terrain had changed, and the scale of things. We had fought in, given, Armored Core had never been super detailed on environments, but we did have enough variance in our landscapes to make some memorable arenas. Crest Base, Edel Base, Treen City. Maps like that always pop out when you tend to talk nostalgic with fans, but you had a lot of wastelands. You just had a lot of just open spaces, just open areas and very, very little cover. But if anything, that kind of catered to a flight-centric game. Here we were introduced to unbelievable boosting capabilities. Permaflight. That was a thing that players really aspired for in the past, but it was just a pushover to pull in Armored Core 4. Overboost, nearly unlimited levels. Not completely unlimited, but definitely on par with anything we saw with the use of Op Intensify or with plus enhancements in the previous incarnations of the series. So the movement game, the mobility game, was just drastic, the change. And I was a little skeptical about what that meant at first. It kind of seemed like mass implemented Op-I want to say, or plus abilities, but this was something I was still willing to go with, just to kind of delve into and just give some time. So just after getting my feet wet a bit, just plunging in, getting the new control scheme, full analog. That was another deal. That had been slowly introduced towards the end of Armored Core 3. Getting used to dual firing and the new FCS lockbox, which was just flat out odd. I just started to kind of dig into the missions, and this just slow creeping sensation set in that this wasn't the AC that we had come to know for so long. And I don't mean that as in, oh, why isn't the gameplay the same? Oh, why am I not playing Last Raven 2.5? No. but very, very, very key elements of the series. If anything, this launch reminded me more of a title like Zone of the Enders, or maybe even a really fast-paced Gundam game, if anything. But nevertheless, it's Armored Core, right? It's Armored Core, so we press on, and I played through the whole thing and got completion and whatnot, but it was just empty. I just felt that leg classes, weapons, there were so many things that had been shoeboxed, pigeonholed, mitigated, and just ridden into just obscurity. Myself, being a hardcore quad player, one of the most bothersome things was seeing what happened to quad legs. Quads in Armored Core 4 gain their fastest movement upon being on the ground. So the ground game was really important for them to maintain your top speed and whatnot, usage of cannons. The ground may as well have been a minefield, though. You wanted to spend most of your time in the air, especially with some of the new grenade launchers and whatnot. It just really made surface contact dangerous. Now, I'm not saying quads couldn't be played in midair, of course, but this is where the sniper cannon and the quad started to be presented with their marriage. And I felt it was just a little unfortunate. I mean, sure, it's a weapon that happened to fit the quad very well, but most of the designs just tended to push towards certain methods and certain styles of play. The meta felt constrained for once, and it felt just a little choking. So I strove on ahead, though. I tried even more. I know I gamed a lot with Cleric, did some the online that we could. We visited, and just issue after issue. And then we actually got online, and the lag warping and whatnot, because primarily due to the netcode. For those of you who aren't too familiar with it, the netcode for AC4, especially if you were trying to connect with someone from Japan or you were playing with someone from the EU version, it was really rough. And part of it was the speed, with the new advent of Quick Boost. The netcode had a harder time tracking that, but also it just seemed the more distance you have, the more distance you had between players, that is, the more warping you had that occurred. You could be firing at someone from a distance of 400 or 500, and the next instant they'd be on your head or on your side and whatnot. And you expect some lag, given. But to the scale that we received in an AC4, I just felt it was just a travesty. So, in any case, before I have my first live Oprah moment on this show, that's
Too late.
really where things are heading at this point, I am going to pass the mic to Cleric about the topic of AC4. So, in the meantime, I'll collect my tissues and...
I was halfway expecting violin music to bust out there, but we'll have. This is Cleric. My perspective on AC4 is a little bit similar to Zealous's here, a little bit different in the sense that I had some experience in different places. First, we're coming off Last Raven. I mean, I've said maybe many times, Last Raven is arguably the best multiplayer version of AC to date. If I want to do a tournament to now for a LAN tournament or get together, I would pick Last Raven. It's just so good. And so when Armored Core 4 was announced, we saw finally we're getting an art change. Now, what I mean by that is this. We had the same art style since Armored Core 3. So you had Armored Core 3, Silent Line, Nexus, Ninebreaker, and Last Raven all had the same basic part structure as far as how they look aesthetic-wise. So finally with AC4, we're going to see a change in how things look. And, of course, the graphics, the graphics, the next-gen technology. And, of course, we're all kind of geeky, nerdy people, so we thought that was kind of cool things looking. AC is getting an update. Then AC4 came out. The multiplayer didn't get to that at first, obviously. You want to go through the single player, as any good Raven should. After getting over the single player, story plot was, okay. Final battle was, okay. So then, of course, after you get all the parts you need, you go online. And lo and behold, I get my first taste of the lag warping that was AC4. I actually called AC4 Lag Fest more than I called it AC4. what Zealous mentioned earlier, a guy could be 300 or 400 feet in front of you, and the next thing you know, he's blading you in the back of the head, and you're instantly dead. I mean, there is nothing more frustrating than thinking you got this guy pegged, you're leading him good, you have the perfect weapon for it, and all of a sudden you're dead. It says mission failed. Like, what in the world just happened? That happened a lot in AC4. And so, of course, there's, as any Armored Core game has, there's metagame. And the metagame with AC4 Online was very simple. There is no reason to use any other leg type other than bipeds. There just wasn't. There was zero reason to use a tank. There was next to no reason to use a quad because they were basically grenade bait, as you mentioned before. So basically, bipeds or reverse joints are pretty much all you had the option to. And really, reverse joints were popular because nice, good jumping height. But basically, you had no reason to use any other leg type in AC4 other than a biped, which works out for me because I'm a heavy biped. But at the same time, I'm heavy, which basically made me bigger cannon fodder for online lag. And so you saw basically the same cookie-cutter design on most of the top rankers. And that was something that was interesting, too, in AC4. Not only was there an online component, there was also a ranking system. Now, this ranking system was purely based off wins and losses, nothing, and also who you killed and things like that, and your rating. But it really was not a well-thought-out system because all it did was reward people who were cheap. And so basically the top 10 rankers on every single board, whether it be Japanese or American, it was always a lightweight biped with the fastest booster, the fastest quick boost, and they always had missiles and dual rifles because those seem to be the only two weapons in the game that managed to cut through the lag shield that everyone seemed to have whenever they played this game online. And speaking of quick boost, that was a change in AC4. Instead of just over boosting with core parts, you also had quick boosting. Zealous mentioned the netcode. I don't think From actually thought ahead as far as the sheer speeds that were being busted out in this game. We're talking people moving at close to 1,000 speeds, and that was nothing they even touched before in Armored Core. And you were going so fast, and you throw in quick boosting, it was basically a temporary boost of speed that the netcode couldn't keep up with. So you had people who were phasing all over the screen. You thought there was people teleporting, and you're basically playing Armored Core 4 Teleport Edition. That's kind of what you felt like you were playing. And it kind of made playing online useless. You could never hit anything. So there was no originality with design online because if you didn't use missiles or didn't use rifles, you could hardly hit anyone with anything, which is sad because I like big, gigantic, bulky weapon arms with grenades and bazookas and massive laser cannons, I like big damage, and this whole game basically completely negated that entire idea, and it was frustrating. But going on with the online play even more is that I said stupid Kai earlier. The reason I say stupid Kai because that was a joke back then. Stupid Kai because you get disconnects and random DCs and random lag and slowdowns. But sadly enough, I actually had a chance to play X-Link Kai with Armored Core 4. And I could not believe my eyes was the fact that X-Link Kai had less lag than the built-in online feature in Armored Core 4. I was blown away that was the truth. That made no sense. But X-Link Kai was better. Sadly enough, it was. So you had that round. Well, then I'm probably one of the few people here who had the privilege of playing Armored Core 4 in a LAN setting where you network two PS3s together on the same thing and they played against each other. Completely different game. I would actually say if you were to have a LAN tournament on Armored Core 4, all cannons should basically be banned because they basically never missed, especially the laser cannons. Oh my word, those things are accurate. And the bazooka arms, which are my favorite thing, by the way, were just utterly destructive. And the LAN play against online play was so vastly different that playing against your little test AC and going online did not mean anything. It literally meant squat as far as actually being effective online. The worst thing is, I think, with online play on the 4 in particular, is that it caused a lack of diversity in build types. I mean, you always saw some of the cookie-cutter designs in previous games, but I know in the tournaments and the gatherings I went to, I never saw too much of the same thing. I usually saw a good amount of variety. But in AC4, there wasn't variety. And I think that had a lot to do with two things. One was the fact that 360 and PS3 were split. This is the first time in the Armored Core series where on the player base was actually split on 2 different consoles. That's always been either on PlayStation or PlayStation 2 up until this point. And I think that really did hurt the community to a point, because certain people wanted to play with each other and they couldn't. People were like selling systems, trading systems, borrowing games, trying to get things figured out to play with other people, and all being for naught anyways, because the online system ended up being terrible no matter what they did. 360 actually ended up being a little bit better, which I can't really attest to that because I never actually played it on the 360. I know people who did play it and said the lag was not quite as bad, and matches were a little more sustainable, but not still that great. So the community being divided basically made it impossible to do in-person gatherings. And since everyone's like, oh, we don't need in-person gatherings anymore, we have online. I call it quote-unquote online because it never really was for me. It was too terrible for me to put up with it.
Well, if I can interject here real quick on that topic, I mean, LAN events would have been impossible at this point anyways because everyone's playing on 2 different systems. I mean,
exactly.
That would have been impossible to organize properly.
Unless you had a bunch of people who had adapters that you can use, like a PS2 adapter on the 360, which they didn't make those, but I don't know how many people actually have one of those, and that'd be a gigantic pain. And it would kind of disable the idea of like 3 different stages of quick boosting, which I won't even get to that mechanic. That's an whole other topic in of itself. But this is my biggest, probably, let me clarify here. My biggest issue with Armored Core 4 was this. They tried to make Armored Core mainstream. Now, I'm all for trying to find a bigger player base. I mean, if you don't get a big enough player base, your game doesn't make enough money, and so your game dies, your company loses. I understand all of that. But Armored Core has always been such a niche, crowded game that Armored Core 4 tried to make it more mainstream. And I feel like that kind of messed with it, the formula for success that it had before. And I'm all for new players. I've always been very welcoming to new players. I want the community to thrive and strive and move forward. And you aren't going to be able to do that if everyone you have playing your game is 80 years old in the future. It's never going to work like that. You have to have new blood in the system. But at the same time, that new blood was not niche crowded-minded people. They were like, oh, I want my Call of Duties, or I want my this, or I want my that. And it's just, that's not what Armored Core was ever meant to be. And you could see that mentality leaking into a lot of the player base because they were all about, oh, look at my win rate and look at my ranking score and look how many. And you look at all their designs and they're all lightweight bipeds with super fast speed, quick boosting, and over boosting. And boosting, I want to complain. There were no EO cores. Darn you, not getting into more EO cores. I loved Exceed Orbit. And the community suffered as a whole because of the mentality that came into the new game.
And Cleric, I'd like to make a quick note on that. It's interesting you bring that up, especially about the community. I think there had been a community of AC that had existed for almost as long as things have been around, but we hadn't really noticed. I think if you toured the Game FAQs boards during the early days and whatnot and looked very carefully, you'd notice there was definitely a crowd that wanted to appeal more to using the designs that worked, that were strong, that had the power items, that had the Kurosawa Mark II or whatever have you, or whatever that was winning. But a lot of those people didn't care or weren't concerned about getting in contact with the forums or going to local tournaments for LAN tournaments and whatnot. And as a result, their voice was a little stagnant. You really didn't hear from them. That wasn't a part of it. And I think that was such a shock for fans, longtime fans in the hardcore, that actually encountering that. A lot of us say, where did they come from? You brought all the the COD players and whatnot. But again, we had some good additions and whatnot. But for the most part, it took a lot of people off guard, and I really think that was why.
That is something I definitely want to talk to. I think that's going to be a bulk of a lot of our topic here, but C4. But we haven't even gotten a chance to get to Cheng yet. So
yeah, I'm sorry. I'm just about as passionate as with AC4 and what it did to the series as Zealous is. So yeah, I apologize. I'll get my own tissues and violin here soon.
Don't forget the opera. But I actually don't have too much to add here because I actually came around the AC scene late into the 4 Answer days, so most of Armored Core 4 had passed on at that point. The only interesting note I'd say is that while 4 Answer was the first game I got, it was the AC4 demo that actually got me into it. I just happened to randomly find it on PSN and started playing it, and that's about it. Mine's a pretty small part.
And you got itched by the AC bug.
Yep.
Well, I've got a couple things to add to this. I have spent some time playing Armored Core 4. Actually, last week on the show, I did share a story about giving Armored Core 4 to my nephews as a present the year that it came out, and having to apologize later for giving them such a that says it. I wish I was making that up. It's such a true story. I mean, I bought that not really knowing, because I'd quit Armored Core in the community for other reasons, not because I wasn't happy with the direction it was going in. Although you guys know, and I am definitely noted as not being happy with the direction that it was going in before it even came out. In particular, the split in the community with the two councils. But I figured, you can't really go wrong, and see if I can get my nephews into this game. I played it. I loved Armored Core, and after Christmas had come and gone, and a couple months later, I'm talking to my brother who used to play Armored Core with me. He's like, "Dude, what the fuck did they do to that game?" And I'm like, "What are you talking about?" He's like, "It's garbage," and and he's right. I mean, obviously, from what you guys are saying. I think the overall opinion here is that Armored Core 4 sucked. There was not really much to like about it. And I'm going to ask that question before we go into other aspects of that. Is there anything really good that you can say about Armored Core 4? Is there something that shines with this game? Or is it really just a big, smelly turd?
I know, I'm sorry, I'll just do one quick thing here. I know Zealous mentioned the lack of variety in the maps, a lot of open spaces. Aside from the aesthetic being kind of drab, I did like the actual part designs themselves. Like you had the triple wing cannon, which was just absolutely incredibly cool looking.
Yeah.
I love that thing. There's a lot of the individual parts. There was some uniqueness put into it, which I thought was really cool. So if anything stood out for me as a positive thing, Armored Core 4 was the redesign a lot of the parts and the aesthetic on some of the things. Now I realize they kind of went a little too Gundam-ish probably on some of the things, especially like some of the actual part designs as far as like cores and legs and things like that. But as far as the actual weapons designs go, I really do like a lot of the weapons in Armored Core 4 from an aesthetic standpoint.
Well, yeah, I definitely remember hearing some complaints as far as the style overall, but I got that. You were talking a bit on the topic of how they were trying to make the game more mainstream, and I definitely think when you're thinking about a Japanese game, when you're thinking about a mech game, they went a very anime-ish with it. And not my particular taste, but I got it. Yeah, I was fine with that, and I agree. I think I definitely think there were some really cool aesthetics, just the designs and in some areas were really cool. And again, at the same time, the game very much was playing homage to a lot of the previous parts in Armored Core as well. And I think as far as that, the visual design aspect looked well. I think execution was also off, but and we. In particular, Cleric, Zealous, and I, we're in the same team in Armored Core 5. We've talked about this off and on for months now. I think one of the topics that we've spoken about when it comes to Armored Core 4, and I remember in particular last time I was complaining about Armored Core 4, and that's when I had recently played it here for a few hours. Just so much of the game just feels rushed, and like in particular the user interface. For getting around from one area to the other. I was putting together better stuff in my first semester in college for my digital art degree, for the menus and the interfaces. It's just bad. And Zealous, I think you had confirmed the fact that FromSoftware did say that Armored Core 4 was rushed. It was pushed out sooner than it should have been. I think that shows. And it's. A lot of what you guys have been talking about, and a lot of what we've been talking about in general is, here, FromSoftware had the foresight to see this is our opportunity to really push this game out to a larger player base. We're going to put it on 2 consoles. It's gutsy. It's a very ballsy move, but they're going to try it, and I don't blame them for that, although I didn't like it one bit. And there's problems with that even today due to that. But, they saw an opportunity to, really grab a larger player base, and then they just They failed on every single front to do so. Online play, but it sucks. All right, you are maybe reaching out to more people, but now you've destroyed the community. Now we not only can't play online, but we can't even have proper LAN events. You brought in an element in this community that a lot of people just weren't very comfortable with, and it just, I hate to, I hate to be such a downer, but I'm really glad I missed Armored Core 4 for the most part.
Yeah. And to add something to your online thing too is that realize this is just basically when we say the first time it's been online, we're talking about North America. Japan's had online since Another Age, World War II, Another Age. So
separation to make.
The first online outing was just so disappointing, and it just kind of like makes my head hurt.
Yeah, well, and with that, Tierson, you're talking about FromSoftware seizing opportunities. I posted an article about this, not an article, just a post on ACL about what From did with not For Answer, with Another Age. They were actually one of the first to push online settings to be packaged with the release. Back in, oh goodness, the early 2000s, there weren't really a whole lot of PlayStation 2 games, if any, to even have online, and From were one of the first ones to jump on that. We didn't get that packaged with the U.S. release because Age Tech pushed it out, a few months early and whatnot. That's a whole other story. But From have always had that initiative, and this was just a case where things just really exploded.
Yeah, and again, talking on that topic, we were discussing that recently about how it is funny how the Armored Core games really were on the cutting edge as far as multiplayer. Even using the, what was it called, the iLink in the PS1 days, allowing you to make something so customizable as far as your AC, and then actually being able to butt heads with your friends with it, and just being on the cutting edge of that too. Really just kind of being last in line as years went on. And Japan can have what Japan had. We really can't talk about that because that's not what we got. I think everybody knows that in some form Japanese players got online before we did. But it just, getting back to 4 though, I mean, that's where things really, how do you, I don't understand, as a responsible game developer, someone who's been around as long as FromSoftware, that you release Armored Core 4 the way that you did. I mean, there's such thing as beta testing, and I know they did it. How could they not know the online was going to be so bad?
Yeah. But there's a lot missing and a lot lacking, and I think From caught on to that with For Answer. At least they recognize the issues. They got feedback from the community and whatnot, and you had some changes, okay? Some changes that were made, but for the most part, we were heading towards another release of a lot of things the same. So.
Oh, I think you're segueing perfectly into For Answer, unless there was anything else that somebody really just wanted to touch on AC4 before we move on.
Do I have to talk about For Answer?
Yeah, that one dude who hasn't been able to talk a lot because everyone's talking so much.
You said you didn't have anything to say.
That's true. But the only thing I would probably add is, since I wasn't really there, I'm actually okay with AC4. Not really in love with it, but don't really hate it. The only thing I would say in respect is that it was a different direction. Maybe it wasn't the best direction or the more well thought out, but it was something new. And after having been through 3 all the way to LR for what that was 5 years, I think, Cleric, was it 5 years of that?
Oh, from 3 to Last Raven. It was
3 to Last Raven.
3 years.
Yeah, 3.
3. Okay, after 3 years having the same game, same designs, it was kind of a nice change.
It's hard to dispute that it wasn't time for a change of pace. A lot of us, I think there's only so many times we can rename the UL core or the dingo legs or whatnot to something else without recognizing the design before. So aesthetic-wise, it was time for a change. And with next gen, there's your time to do it.
And at that point, it's like I bet you anything there would have been a Super Last Raven 2 in the next few years if they haven't made that change.
Super Last
Raven 2.
Now you're letting me have stupid pulverizers. Oh.
Oh boy.
We can. All right, let's move on to For Answer.
Yeah.
We can continue bashing this whole, since it basically uses the same system, the same game engine. We can continue bashing it in For Answer then. So let's start with Zealous then. With For
goodness.
Answer.
Going into FA, For Answer was the title that I also made sure to pick up an import copy of. I was actually visiting Hawaii at the time, so this really worked out. I caught a copy of FA coming off a UPS truck that had just come from Japan with the shipment. So I was one of the early NA players to get my hands on it and get a hold of it. And some people were wondering, why would you subject yourself to that? You just went through this whole thing with AC4. What's the point? Well, I love Armored Core. What else can I say? I'd been following the interviews and what the dev team had been saying about it, so I was interested to pick up the next title. And let's see what's to offer. I'll keep an open mind as this as much as possible. However, I did know that, like any AC expansion that you have, you're going to keep the same core system, right? That's not something that's going to change. So dealing with quick boost, dealing with the way cannons work, dealing with flight, a lot of those things, the core mechanics, the gameplay, how ACs moved, that was going to remain the same. But hey, more than fine with that. So I also managed to pick up a 360 copy of For Answer once the US release happened. Supporting it's still, I love doing it even today because they really have a lock on this type of genre. There really isn't a studio producing dynamic mech content like they are. So with picking up the 360 version and the PS3 version, getting a chance to compare them, I got a chance to look at the frame rates, how both games felt. Obviously, you aren't going to have separate parts in each consoles, but I can attest that it is true that the 360 version did have a smoother frame rate as far as running it. That helps somewhat online, but I mostly noticed it for offline play, especially going through the story mode and whatnot. What made FA more appealing for me, why I have slightly better things to say about FA, was really just the story, to be honest, dealing with the arms forts and whatnot. Now, Armored Core has always had abstract storylines and whatnot, and let's face it, you're not going to be reading Hamlet or Shakespeare here. You're expecting high literature, but you had a more engaging plot here. Having that massive advertisement for the six-legged arms fort that was almost like a huge aircraft carrier, via land, and had the missile assault, and with Tierson's favorite AC, the White Glint, making an appearance. Boy, what could go wrong, right? So, arms forts were a blast. You also had a branching storyline similar to Last Raven. Branching in that your choices or missions you took along the course of the game, rather, would determine which ending you'd get or which route you go along. So, by this point, I'm accustomed with the way the mechanics feel and whatnot. I'm just going with it. I'm not playing online or whatnot, and I think that's the other thing that really helped me relax a little bit at this point. It was such a rough transition for me coming off of the Midwest regional tournaments with that circuit, gathering live with players and whatnot, playing a ton online and doing Kai as much as I could, to just not doing it, like just a dead train stop. But by this point, I was kind of playing things casually, and I was keeping an eye on the community and just enjoying the titles for what they were. So this was mostly a single-player experience for me. Finished both campaigns on both consoles without issue, and got through every ending and whatnot. And again, saw some fun part designs. We had Mr. Kawamori back with us again, and he, I think, contributed some great aesthetic. He had a number of new parts. There were some changes to also a core mechanic with an attack. You could overload your PA barrier. In case we didn't mention earlier, a major thing about AC4, for anyone that missed it, you had Star Trek-like shields that would surround your AC. That was called PA, or Primal Armor. Yeah, I'm going there, Star Trek.
You didn't go there; they went there. I'm just
just defined it. You had your PA barrier, and this barrier was your main defense of your AC. Now, you had your shell and your energy defense, but if this barrier was pierced, you may as well have been paper. Most things were going to shred you regardless of the rest of the stats on your AC. So PA was really important, but they introduced a new feature called Assault Armor, AA for short, and you could get within close range of your opponent and detonate your PA barrier to do a whole heap of damage. in one of the later patches, PA was greatly increased, at least the amount you can make use of it, and there was a heyday for it online. I got on just a little bit to see what was happening and got some matches in and some free-for-alls, and it ran rampant at one point. Every time you looked up, it looked like the whole place was glowing with radiation. Someone was constantly exploding or over the sea or under it or next to a building. It was just a mess. And as a result, it was nerfed down in a later patch. You couldn't make use of assault armor in the same way. So you kind of had a quirky mechanic there. The sacrifice of using AAs, obviously I'm sure many of you know, was a slight lack of performance in your overboost. By this point, though, quick boost was such a heavy mechanic that a slower overboost usually wasn't that much of a problem, unless you had a design that's centered around that. And this is kind of interesting. In the past, if you wanted your fast movement or nice, quick, sporadic burst, you normally made use of a trick like slide jumping. Some players might be familiar with from the AC2, AC3 generation, kicking in your overboost, hovering slightly over the ground, cutting in, pressing jump to kind of lock your legs into a slide. Those things were kind of dismissed with 4 and 4A. You had quick boost to pretty much take care of those things. So, but most of all, 4-answer hit a level of speed we have never seen in Armored Core. Insanely fast, especially if you use blades. And this really became an issue online. There was a point where players just couldn't stop complaining about it when you would combine multiple stages of quick boosting, possible overboost as well, and then with the full-on double blade, it was unbelievable speed. So the whole game was very, 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 very fast-paced, even online, and that's something some players loved. It's something others hated. I was kind of at a median about it at this point. I was just interested to see what From were going to do and where they were going to take this. So from a competitive perspective, I still dismiss this title compared to what we'd seen from the other Armored Cores. I just was not willing to accept that. But for a good, just a single player mech title to enjoy, I can understand. I think that's fair, and that's about where I sat in this era.
If I can interrupt for just a second there, I mean, you might have heard me chuckle when you said that you dismissed this title as far as a competitive game. I mean, guys, I just want to make sure that you understand this is someone who's put on some LAN events for the community. That's not a small statement. I mean, thinking about the competitiveness of Armored Core, and for one of the community leaders when it came to the LAN events to say this game's not even worth trying in multiplayer, that's a big deal. I mean, that was a chuckle, more of a kind of a depressing chuckle than anything. It's like that's just such a shame.
Yeah.
Chuckle.
I'm sorry. Go continue. I just want to make sure that was emphasized.
I'd actually like to pass to Cleric here. I'm sure a lot of these things kind of spiked him to some points.
Okay. If I were to summarize 4-answer in a single word, it would be speed. I mean, seriously, like this game. Actually, the interesting thing with the word about speed is with 4-answer is even the FromSoftware said themselves that with 4-answer, the 4 series in general, but especially 4-answer, they wanted to push the speed element as much as they possibly could, and I gotta admit, they pretty much exceeded in that point, because we have never seen anything like this in Armored Core ever. You mentioned the lag warping. I mentioned lag warping a lot in AC4. It just got worse in 4-answer. Now, they did kind of fix the netcode a little bit. Patch version 1.0 of 4-answer wasn't that bad online. 1.1 hit, and they actually increased the speeds across the board for all of the boosters and quick boosters, and that just made things just stupid. And I mean, before I talked about kind of pushing 1,000 around 1,000, we had people pushing 1,400, like on 4-answer, and that was just stupid fast.
Well, hey, Claire, if I can ask you a question real quick on that. So, when we get into 4-answer, is this now an issue of the netcode, having issues with the speed, or is this just, the game is so fast at this point that it makes it hard to even have battles with each other?
I think it's a little bit of both. The netcode was never really fixed like it should, and here's the thing. When you're playing something like a first-person shooter online, you have a guy who's running at what speed? A standardized speed. It's not nothing like, he's running like, running like Superman he's running at a normal pace. You have a regular leisurely pace where someone's running around trying to shoot each other with guns. When you have the speed variance you have in Armored Core 4 Answer, if there's any lag at all, you will have a gigantic difference between where a person started and where they ended when the lag stops. You'll feel it. And with the extreme speed of 4 Answer, it was all the more felt. I mean, whereas before, in 4, you could have, someone be 400 meters away, there'd be a quick lag second, and then they'd be blading in the back. In 4 Answer, they'd be dude 800 meters ahead of you, and then 1 second later, you'd have the mission failure screen up on your screen is what you would have. I mean, it was terrible. And it had a lot to do with people basically exploiting it. I talked before about everyone was using missiles and dual rifles. That changed in 4 Answer. In 4 Answer, everyone had, once again, biped legs, of course. And they had biped legs along with the fastest quick boosters, the fastest overboost they can get with it. And they went 2 routes with this. Either they went with dual blades, or they went with assault armor, the AA thing. Assault armor was a problem for this lag, because with the lag warping as bad as it was, and there was a particular setup with a certain generator and a certain core that your assault armor could one-shot kill people, that basically people were lag warping like crazy, getting behind you, blowing up their AA, and you were dead. I mean, that I can't tell you how many times I saw that happen online, where the match would start, within 15 seconds, someone would assault armor explode, and you'd be dead, and that was the end of the match. Or someone would basically overboost directly at you with quick boosting, and all of a sudden they were gone, and they were double blading you in the back, and you were dead. That happened a lot in this game. And it basically, my explanation for 4 Answer Online, it took all the problems 4 had and just exacerbated them times 1,000. And it really was just frustrating, because it made my favorite weapons, the big, gigantic, explosive weapons, all the more useless in this game. The only redeeming quality, which I agree with Zealous here, was the single-player components with the arms forts. I don't care if you are an old-school AC purist. I don't care. You cannot tell me that you did not enjoy taking out some of those gigantic mechanized arms forts to a point. You can't tell me that, because a couple of them were some of the coolest things I have actually seen in games, period, let alone the Armored Core series. And it was the only redeeming quality in 4 Answer, but no excuse. The multiplayer was even more terrible than 4 was. I don't know what in the world they were thinking doing this. If you're going to increase the speed on your game, you really need to fix your netcode. The netcode should have been priority 1 after all the problems 4 had, and it was so obvious they just didn't care about that. They were just going to go for the design pattern they had, and that's what they went with. So I don't know what else to tell you about that. 4 Answer, it was probably, between the two, I probably like 4 Answer even less than 4, as far from a personal standpoint.
That is shocking.
And okay, that may be shocking, but when I tell you why, I'll explain. Whereas Tierson here, you kind of were not really excommunicated. You excommunicated yourself from the AC scene for a while. Zealous got disenfranchised for a little bit and really kind of stopped being around. I mean, you kind of trolled around the community and kind of paid attention to what was going on, but wasn't really a part of it. Me, on the other hand, I was an administrator on a couple different places, and I was a fairly prominent figure in a few places. A lot of people knew my name, and because of that, I was all about the community. And from day one, I have always been about the community. And I knew this game was suffering the community to a point. And so I tried to do my absolute best, no matter how bad things got, that I would be there for the community to make sure the community didn't die off. So as a part of that, I participated in the tournaments. I set up online events. I did a bunch of stuff like that. So I had to go into this 4 Answer 4A for online multiplayer in a online tournament setting that was just painful to be a part of, because it was the only thing that kept people going, was having design contests and doing online tournaments once in a while, realizing the lag was terrible. And so the reason why 4 Answer was probably the worst one in the series for me, it was just because I saw how much it caused suffering in the community, because I witnessed it firsthand with a lot of these things we ran, and it just was painful to watch.
Somebody give this guy a hug. He definitely went through some hard times. So I mean that, I I was not a part of the community at that point. However, I did from time to time pay attention. I did see your name around a lot. Just kind of trolling. Certainly not to any degree that it sounds like even Zealous was, where he even kept up. I didn't keep up. I would just occasionally check in. No, man, that's rough. That's rough. I mean, I can understand that for sure. At least coming from the early part of the golden days for the AC community during the PS2 time, trying to build that community, which I think on that level is what bothers me a bit, is because we had, and on the American side, built up a strong community, and even before the PS3 and the Xbox 360 games had come out, things had died down a bit, but everybody was just kind of in a slumber at that point. We were waiting for these games to come out, and it wasn't like the community had died. It just had kind of died down. We were waiting.
It changed a lot, and to add to you too, it kind of died down some. And during the 4 answer there was a huge sudden interest in X-Link Kai again. And during the 4 answer time frame, there actually was a fairly large push, and a lot of people were playing Last Raven on X-Link Kai again. And it was kind of a good thing to see that to a point, because it kind of helped re-cement the community to a point like, hey, this is what AC was meant to be. But it also caused the problem I talked about in the previous one, how it kind of split the community. And what that did, it split the community even more. You had the newer introduced to the series, and you had the old vets. And the old vets wanted nothing to do with the new series. And the new series, the new players like, well, this is all I know. And everyone's like, well, you suck unless you play Last Raven. Don't come near me. And they're like, hey, well, include me in this. I want to be a part of this. Like, no, if you're not going to play Last Raven, well, I want to play it. We'll get ourselves a PlayStation 2 and a copy of Last Raven. Okay. And then they would proceed to completely obliterate them and not really introduce them to the Last Raven series or part of that at all. And it just divided the community and split it up even more. And that's all the more reason why I don't like 4 answer, is because it even caused that to happen.
Well, let me stop you there, because we haven't heard from Cheng yet on this, and so before we continue on to that aspect, which I definitely want to get into, let's hear from Cheng on 4 answer, because this is actually at this point that he's playing. So
it's okay. I'm getting riled up here. I gotta press the mute button for a little bit. I'm getting riled.
It's cool.
Hey, go ahead, Cheng.
Go.
This is when you officially got into it, before Armored Core 5, during 4 answer. So let's hear your perspective on Armored Core 4 answer.
Yeah. Okay. So with Armored Core 4 answer, the first game I got, obviously, that was around the time when the community had pretty much died off. This was when AC5 was being first announced. The online scene was pretty much dead, so I never got to play that.
Let me interrupt you for just saying, because when Armored Core 5 was first announced, there's basically 2 announcements for that. There was one that came about 2 years before the game actually came out, and then they kind of rebooted everything they were going to do with AC5, and then they kind of re-announced it. So which one are you talking about?
The first one. It's actually some time after the first announcement, but not quite. It was, I think, about a half a year before the second one. But, yeah. But the only interesting thing I can say in respect to 4 answer was, of all the Armored Core games, it had, I think, one of the most complete single-player experiences. It didn't have the best story, but it was pretty decent. It wasn't. 4 and 4 answer kind of moved away from the indirect storytelling that 3 and all the way to the Last Raven kind of went upon. So it was kind of interesting to see this new directions. And for the missions, they were actually, like Cleric said, they were very enjoyable, especially the arms forts.
Yeah.
I guess you could kind of say it's kind of funny because Armored Core 4 and 4 answer were both online, but the best part about it is, the single player.
You can't see it. I'm shaking my head.
Yeah. I'll make Cheng, you realize the irony of that statement. We're talking about the merits of single player in Armored Core, which is the single biggest complaint in Armored Core for the longest time, that basically it had no story plot. And we're talking about, for 4 and 4 answer, the merits of single player. Like, that's an oxymoron and a half as far as talking about Armored Core games and how the single player was the best, when it was always the multiplayer. That shows you they did something wrong there.
I mean, From Software has even shown how little the story can matter to these games. I mean, Nine Breakers is a perfect example of that, where and pretty much Master of Arena too. I mean, yeah, there's some story there, but these are basically arena games, and so I mean, even they've shown in a couple of their versions, yeah, fuck the story, whatever.
Yeah.
Here's
Well,
some
there
new
were
parts, here's some arena, and we're fine with it. So it's
Yeah.
yeah.
But also, I guess it was kind of really interesting because it was kind of like a throwback to I guess Project Phantasma, Master of Arena, and Last Raven. Basically, those particular games because they had a really strong story tied to them. So it was interesting to see that brought up again. Well, it's good. It was like it was a different experience, I guess.
Okay, so I wanted to make sure that we'd heard a bit from everyone before we moved on to kind of the community aspect, because at this point I think we are painting a pretty good picture of what had happened. I mean, I did pop in from time to time to see where things were with Armored Core. I had other things going on in my life, wasn't playing, but I never have touched 4 Answer. Quite frankly, I mean, look, I want to test it out, but I'm not willing to pay anything more than just like a few bucks for this game, just because of how bad 4 was. And honestly, I don't, whatever. I don't really need to play. It does sound like, okay, the single player sounds really good. That's great. That has never been a thing for me with Armored Core. It has always been the excuse for why I have what I have in front of me when it comes to the building the AC and doing verses. So it's never been a huge aspect for me. Really the only thing I have to say is that checking things out online, 4 Answer, this is before 5 had come out, and where Armored Core was, I'd always see that damn AC white glint, and I to this day I don't get it. I don't like it. I don't understand it, and this must have something to do with the single player aspect of these games, because I mean, this is from a complete outsider perspective on this. It's stupid. That's all I really got to say. The white glint, I just don't see it. I don't get it. I mean, even in the intros, he doesn't even see all that.
Take it, go.
All right, he's got to talk to somebody there for a second. All right. No, obviously something going on there in Cheng's side of things, but for me, and I was talking to Zealous about this, and really getting what really bothers me about that AC, besides the fact that he's plastered everywhere, is the fact that white glint is the embodiment of what has been so wrong with Armored Core. And it's not even so much the style of the AC. If you think he just looks cool, then whatever. But I mean, this AC, this figure for this game comes at a time where, really Armored Core, the game, the series itself, and the community has really been plummeted into the dark ages. And it's we are in the darkest days of Armored Core at this point. So I will give White Glint no credit for anything. And because he does come from that time. He is the manifestation of these games. So overall, I don't really have much to contribute other than that. From someone who loved these games, who loved the Armored Core community, to see what it has turned into, and to see this almost a mascot of it. Yeah, I have a big issue with that. Besides that, I do. It hasn't been noted, but I think it does need to be noted that Sega was the U.S. distributor for Armored Core 4, not the distributor for 4 Answer. And there may be other reasons for that, but you can't help but to look at the disdain that people have for Armored Core 4 and think that Sega must have just kind of given up on this. This is obviously a game that did not hit its player base well at all. Ubisoft brought a 4 Answer to us. So, we go from Age Tech having done several titles for Armored Core to Sega dropping out after one of them. And this will actually happen again. So, let's go ahead and do any final thoughts that we have on this. I think I've kind of wrapped up where things have gone for Armored Core at this point. We'll do some final thoughts as far as AC4 and 4 Answer, and then we're going to take a little bit of a break. So you guys can take a break, and we're going to take a little bit of break ourselves, and we will play during that break. We will play our really awesome Ravens'Voice theme song that you guys can listen to while we take a little bit of a break. And So yeah, let's go ahead and wrap up this area, and then we'll start with Armored Core 5. So
Okay,
let's go ahead and start with Zealous. Any final comments?
As far as four answer, AC4 coming out of things and being introduced to 5, one thing that it did change, I think, about AC fans, whether you were a veteran or whether you were coming into the series for the first time, was getting you accustomed to a different way of handling an AC, and by that I mean a faster, fiercer AC. In past titles, worrying about positioning or whatnot, or using different strategies for overboost or where you're going to land with your boost or hard landings, it was more of a key factor because the movement just wasn't as fast. But you had to master a different skill set for AC4, mastering quick boost and how overboost flowed, and the rest of those mechanics really gave players, I think, a different tweak coming into Armored Core 5. And interestingly enough, those skills would translate to a degree to what we'd be seeing down the road and what would happen. But ultimately, AC4 and AC4 Answer, it's such a mixed bag. I think there's going to be your fans that are very fond of it, that enjoy very fast gameplay, very quick-paced type of action titles, and others who would want more of a kind of median line with their gameplay. So, with that in mind, I'd like to pass things over to Cleric, 'cause I know he's been pretty fired up this whole time.
Yeah. I think I'll stop now. I think I made my point pretty clear how I feel about the 4 and 4 Answer series. I mean, my problem is I've been playing this game very similar to you, Zella, since the Armored Core demo disc from Pizza Hut. I mean, that's how long I've been playing this game. And it is something that I didn't have much honor or privilege to play against anyone else until Armored Core 2. And I've been a part of the community ever since Armored Core 2, as far as the online scene goes and getting together with gatherings and forums and stuff like that. And I just saw this community continue to grow and grow and grow from AC2 all the way through Last Raven.
Yeah. And
my biggest gripe with 4 and 4 Answer is how it just killed it. It killed it not in the sense that it is gone. The Armored Core community still exists. But the problem, how the Armored Core community exists today, is a shell of its former self. It's nothing even close like it used to be before. And you would basically have two groups. You have the old, I call them old has-beens. That's basically what they are now. People who had the glory days of Armored Core, and when that got stripped away from them, they pretty much call anyone who plays the newer games idiots or noobs or whatever they want to call them. I'm a little nicer than they are. You also have the new school group that likes the more mainstream feel to it and all those things like that. And I feel like it's a shame for them because they don't really understand the greatness that really can be Armored Core, and they're so stuck in the mainstreaming of a lot of video games that they're kind of missing out on the nicheness and the uniqueness that Armored Core had all the way from AC1 through Last Raven. And I feel bad for the newer players because they missed out on a really golden opportunity to experience this game in its purest form. And I think Last Raven is a good example of that. And basically, my final thoughts on this game were I wish it didn't exist. I mean,
harsh.
I mean, I love, like I said, I love FromSoftware. I love this series. I played Armored Core 4. Armored Core 4 and 4 Answer are still sitting on my shelf about 5 feet to the right of me. Okay, I still own the games.
Oh, yeah.
I love the Armored Core series. That's why I own the games. That's why I played the games. That's why I talked about the games, talked about the metagame, discussed parts, designs, ideas, all on forums and online setting, and encouraged growth and encouraged communication and encouraged discussion. I mean, I love the series itself, but I hate what this did to people, and I hate what this did to the community in general. So if I could have just skipped 4 for Answer or gone straight to 5, it may not have been as bad. But then who knows?
Yeah.
If we would have had 4 and 4 Answer, maybe I would have appreciated 5 as much as I did. So then again, I have my own caveats about that, but that's another topic. But before I go any further here, and I'm going to get heated up again, I'm going to start.
I'm going to wind it on down. Pass
I'm
it on
going
to
to
Cheng
have to mute myself here. I'm going to pass it on to Cheng, and as he only had a little bit of to go with 4 Answer, but I'm sure he has a little bit more to add here. If anything you want to add on here,
Your thoughts, Cheng?
Just a little bit. But so basically, how I view 4 and 4 Answer as being new ideas, something that could have been innovative, but in the end wasn't very well executed. And while that did give us a strong multiplayer, it gave us give us a strong single player, it gave us a poor multiplayer. And while I don't really hold any grudges against the game, like Cleric said, instead of really ushering in the new age, the future of Armored Core, what it could be, it actually did the exact opposite for the community. It got it stuck in nostalgia, and as Cleric said, it left us with a lot of has-beens. But in the end, I think it didn't do what it was...
What it set out to do.
Exactly. And the worst part about it is how badly it impacted the community.
Yeah. We're still... I think we're still going to be feeling the ripples from that for some time, but
so many ripples.
But we have things, definitely on the reversal for 5. So that's the end of this first segment. We're going to go ahead and break things down for a bit here. I'm Zealous, again hosting with Tierson and FromCheng and Cleric. We'll see you in a moment.
Oh yeah, more of me.
Oh yeah,
More
more of me. AC5 people.
Sorry.
Yeah, Cheng actually has some voice in AC5, so this will be good.
Yeah.
We'll be back in a minute.